Hello, it's Friday again. These weeks fly by. So today's topic, we are going to be talking about unpaid overtime, and I guess it's largely going to be focused on the NHS. Again, I've got some brilliant panelists with me today. We'll get going in a minute. We'll just give people another 30 seconds or so to recognise the LinkedIn or the LinkedIn Live prompt so that people start joining. As we go through today, everybody on LinkedIn, if you can use the comments box to add your comments and thoughts and questions, that'll be fantastic. We can see it on stage, so we can see the comments that come through. Okay, then we're waiting for just one other panelist, but I'm sure they'll join as we get going. We're tight on, we're trying to do everything in 1 hour, and we want it to be a massive value add today. So we'll get going as quick as possible. Again, please remember to add your comments and questions into the LinkedIn comments, and then we'll pick them up. Okay, so we'll get started. So we're going to start off with just a quick 60-second intro with the panelists. Then I will just give an overview of the methodology of what we're doing today and the research that we're doing today and how we're doing it. Then we'll give everybody 15, 20 minutes in the audience to contribute and share their insights into our research, little mini research project. And then us as panelists will go through and discuss the findings from the report. This is all about showcasing how easy it potentially is to generate good qualitative research. Now, this is just a small taster, and I'll give us the caveats when I do my little update. But it's about showcasing that we can change the paradigm of qualitative data being really expensive and taking months and months to do. It doesn't need to. Okay, then, so I will kick off with my quick intro. I'm Anthony Lawton. I'm founder of Fit to Care and Insight Genie, the tool we're using today. My focus is cognitive science, behavioral change science, and AI, so that we can change the way we think about problems. We can create these critical insights that make us go, I hadn't seen that before. So we can see problems in new ways. We can use this new way of identifying problems to minimize bureaucracy and really focus more on the patient and on the citizen. That's my big drive. I believe that the public sector in particular is really struggling. We've got staff that are really overwhelmed and well-being is poor. We've got organizations that are not sustainable, and I believe we can change these things, and we can have hundreds of thousands of impacts on citizens and patients. So that's my drive with all this. So if I hand over next to Nicola, who's next on my screen, if you can introduce yourself, Nicola, that'd be great.
Hi, I'm Nicola Bailey. I am currently the post-pregnancy contraception manager across Bristol, setting up a new innovative service. My background is women's health and very much about empowering women with their healthcare and ensuring that we have informed decision making when anybody's making any care choices. And I think that's one of the biggest errors of my career at the minute, that we're giving the patients the right information and that they're getting the right care, and that everything is standardized across, and we're not having postcode lotteries of care.
Yeah, fantastic. Remind me to catch up with you about the menopause work that I've been working on as well, because it's absolutely aligned with what you're doing. Fantastic. And then over to Rory.
Thanks, Anthony. I'm Rory van der Merwe. I'm dialing in from South Africa. So bringing in a different perspective. Part of that is I'm a psychologist in terms of my training, a teacher, and along the way, my passion has been in the healthcare space. I call it specifically during lockdown, we realized that our healthcare care workers, our helpers and our healers were the ones that actually needed healthcare care by the healthcare workers. And our South African profession actually created a healthcare care workers network. But at that point in time, I was too burned out to volunteer, because you can't give from an empty vessel. Yeah. So this is me bouncing back, my resilience coming in all these years later and saying, I've rejuvenated, I've recovered, I've restored, and I'm repaired. And it's now about my turn to make my contribution.
Fantastic. I think we probably all feel a bit like that, which is why we're trying to push these change initiatives forward. That's brilliant. Okay, so I will just share the screen and give this quick overview before we start talking our experiences on this topic. So unpaid overtime, I think we're going to get into the discussion. It's quite a big topic and we might just get quite deep on this one. Just a little bit of housekeeping, if you like. I've said that we really welcome people in the audience to make their contributions into this, share your insights, so that the more people and the more variety of people that we get to contribute, the richer the data will be and the insights will be. This link is within the chat in the comments section in the LinkedIn event page. So if you find a link that ends 1140, click on that and you can start to enter your contributions. You can probably start that process in about 5 minutes time when I've just finished these slides. And then you've got 15 minutes, good 15 minutes or so to enter your contributions whilst we discuss our experiences. When you click on that link, you will get a pop-up which is asking you to accept the terms and conditions, which is largely around, please don't enter any personal data or any personal identifiable data. That's one of the big things with this system, is we want it to be anonymous so that people can really show and give us their deep felt insights as to what is actually going on a particular topic. So anonymous is a key driver, and it also supports the system in terms of information governance. So click those buttons, and then you'll come through to the next screen, which is giving us the context for this topic. So unpaid overtime in the NHS. Most of us that work in health are not doing it because we want to be millionaires. We're doing it because we want to make a difference to society. We are public servants, essentially. And I think, and we'll get into this today in the topic in the discussion, I think there's a potential to be taken advantage of when you've got that ethos coming into the service. Let's try together to understand how much of a problem this is, the scale of the problem, and the impact on your family life in particular if you are doing a lot of overtime. The estimation, the second question, is just asking you to estimate what overtime you think you might be doing on average per week that's unpaid. We don't want absolute exact numbers. This is not meant to be an absolute scientific study on the exact number of hours that the NHS is taking from us all. It's to give us a feel, a sense of what the scale of this is. It's not, we don't need it to be exact. We just need a sense of it, and that's what we'll take forwards. Once you've seen the context and you've got your head to it and you're in the zone, there's then 3 simple questions, and these are qualitative questions, intentionally that way, so that we as managers don't point you in a direction to give, so you give us the answers we want you to give. They're open and qualitative, so you can just open your brains and your hearts to what is actually going on from your perspective. That's the key thing. So you've got 15 minutes to really stop and think, and that's a big rationale for this system, is to get people to just stop, put your foot on the ball, and do some thinking, because often we're in meetings and we're back-to-back meetings and we never really get time to think. So this is trying to get us to stop and think. Just consider those questions, enter some text in each one of them, and then press submit. And then pretty quickly, Insight Genie will produce the report, which I'll show you in a second. Well, we'll show you when it runs live, and we'll talk through that in the last 25 minutes or so. Just a quick few notes on the methodology and the guidelines, because I don't want to be misleading and giving the impression that Insight Genie is a magical, wonderful magic bullet that none of us need to do any work and AI will take over the world and none of us will be employed. That is not the plan at all. As I said at the beginning, this is about insight generation, where as managers we can go, I didn't even know that existed. I didn't even know that was a problem. It's about that insight generation to stop us from going down a fixed path of thinking we know what's going on and we know what the solutions are, when often we don't. We need more insights and more inputs from different stakeholders to make us realize that we need to consider more things to get the best outcomes and what we're doing. So it's all about getting things right first time. And this tool is about giving us that direction, getting us to be directionally correct. That's what it's all about. I see it as a Pareto tool. It's an 80-20 tool. It gives us 80% of the content and the information, the insights that we need to make better decisions with very little effort. It's never going to be a report that you can just print off and take directly to the board. It's not meant to be that thing. It's meant to generate insights and make you go looking for the extra things you need to consider to make better decisions. It's about being directionally correct. So hopefully that gives a bit more context. Hopefully it makes sense. And now you've got 19 minutes to enter your insights into the system. And then if you can click submit by 12:29, I'll then go off into the back end, pull the report up so that the panel can chat through the results from what we've all put into it. So now we, the panel members, have got 19 minutes now where we can just talk through our experiences of overtime. And I feel like I'm getting bored with the sound of my own voice. So shall we start with Nicola and just take your views on it, Nicola?
Yeah, surely. It's becoming a massive problem at the minute within the NHS, and we all know that. But it's now compromising staff's well-being because people aren't potentially taking their breaks. We are pushing ourselves to the limit, and then it has that impact on our family lives where we come home and we literally can't give anything to anybody because we need to shut down and rebuild before we can even have the conversations with people at home. For me and my personal experience, I am renowned for doing unpaid overtime. My job is a privilege for patients and I love what I do, and I just feel bad if I'm handing over things to somebody else that I know I can do myself, and I don't like pushing work onto other people. But I also know can I pour from a cup that is completely full? And that's a no. And I broke down. I've had about 3 breakdowns by now. Burnouts, breakdowns, whatever you want to call them. It's just I've suffered a lot with my mental health, but it's because I do the same patterns. And I think I'm now in my 38th year, and I think I'm just now starting to realise I need to look after myself a lot more. I need to take my lunch breaks where I'm actually protected. And I literally go off the ward. Staff rooms are an amazing thing for staff, and I get that, but sometimes are they the best place to be placed on the ward because people can actually walk in and see you and call you, and then you're losing a bit of your break and you're still not getting that mental downtime. So should staff rooms be taken off all the wards and there's a place where they can specifically go, which is literally just like 5-10 minutes. We're not talking the staff need to walk anywhere unsuitable, but what I find, and one of the trusts that I work in the minute, which is completely amazing, the canteen is actually for staff alone. So there's no patients that enter it, and I think that's a good thing to have, because you know when you're in a canteen and there's patients and staff and you're on alert too, because you're waiting if somebody takes sick, do you need to respond to that? And it has happened in my career when I was back home too, that a patient took unwell when they're in the middle of the canteen. So you're down and you're still not getting that bit of reprieve to help even your mental health. And then you're starting into another scenario, and then you've all that documentation and paperwork, and then you're trying, and everything just goes, there's so much. What I find at the minute is meetings, also unnecessary meetings to have meetings, which is a massive problem. We're having meetings for meetings, but we're not actioning what's coming out of the other meeting to start on to something else. So half of our time now is we could be in 3 or 4 back-to-back meetings, but what is actually coming out of these meetings? Are these meetings being productive? And then you're not getting a break before your next meeting's starting, and then you're directly into another one. And sometimes by the end of by 5 o'clock, you're sitting there going, okay, there was 3 meetings there. Where am I actually going with all this? And that workload piles on, and you just find everything keeps piling on. your personal relationships, anybody in a relationship, your partner has to, what I find is your partner has to be really strong, because you're either staying behind work late, you're coming home tired, they're having to pick up some of the workload. And that can be a lot of strain on a relationship, massively. And it's tough. And I tell people before they get, even your friendships, you're like, I'm a nurse. Just my shift work is completely crazy. I may be off in time, I may not. But what I find is if I plan things after work, sometimes my days will just roll forward. So sometimes you're better not planning stuff and do it last minute to meet up with people, because you don't know exactly when you're actually going to finish on time. What I'm in this for, because I want to better care. But it's coming to the point now, do we have to stop and just say, my shift's finished? It needs to fall on to somebody else. And I don't know what the answer is. Can I potentially ever do that? I don't know.
It's a really good point.
Because
ultimately, it's better management, isn't it? Better management. We know we can forecast and predict that lunch breaks, if we don't plan and manage and have a resource to manage that, will impact on your lunches. We know it. It's predictable. As winter is predictable, so is lunchtime interruptions. So we can plan it. We can manage it if we put our heads to it. I just really resonated with your point around mental health. There was one woman, one nurse in the book that I interviewed in particular that told me her story, which was, really, really extreme actually in terms of her mental health, and how her dad had been a nurse and he'd had a mental breakdown, and she just sees the patterns of the levels of stress in nursing is immense. So I really relate to that. And meetings, I don't know if you managed to see last week's event, but just worth going back and watching the recording from last week, and I'll send you the report as well. I 100% agree with you on the meeting front. We definitely need to do a lot more. And then planning, again, another set of nurse comments in the book around, you just can't plan your life because you're always late. Somebody wants to take you out to the cinema. It's like, I can't predict that I'm going to be able to leave on time. Almost never leave on time. 12 hours without any breaks or hardly any toilet breaks and all those sorts of things. You can only go for so long like that, can't you?
You can, and that's the thing. And I know there's this big drive on self-care, mental health within the NHS and within the trusts. And I think it's amazing, but we're still not getting to the core of what's actually happening. It just takes the staff member to be off sick, and then you're having to pick up. You've got more patients. We know patients these days, there's more acuity, so there's more and more coming out. It's the same as the new nurses and midwives and all coming out these days. I do feel sorry for them. They're literally just being through into the deep end, and it's just like, from when I started my nursing career to where we're at now, we're just expected to take on more and more and more, and it's like, where do you draw the line quite quickly to say, okay, yes, I need to protect my mental health? There's strategies that we can look at to improve this, but it's a culture change. And it's this, somebody once said to me, it's a devotion when you go into nursing. And I was like, it is a devotion, but don't take my good nature for, what is that? Don't take my good nature. I can't even think, right? Don't take my good nature as a way of getting around what I need as a person also. Forget nurses, midwives, any senior management too. We are not robots. We need toilet breaks. We need to debrief after stressful situations. We need to eat. We need to drink. And it's getting to the point now, do you want to put IV fluid bags up and let us run? It's scary. And is this the reason why? I think what was it, the statistics, was it a week ago, 25% of newly qualified nurses are leaving within the year, I think it was. Now, don't quote me on that, but it is something like that. And I was like, what are we doing wrong?
Yeah, some fundamental problems of supply and demand here, aren't there? The capacity to deliver what's required is just not there, is it, at the moment? And there's lots of reasons for that. Just another pickup from another flashback from the book research was I was interviewing the nurse, and you can tell she was, as a manager, you would think, my God, this woman is amazing. You would really want her in your team. And she was talking to me about, overwhelm and what you've just been explaining. And she's like, my children are saying to me, Mum, you can't go on like this. It's insane. But she was like, well, if I don't do it, who else will?
Yeah.
And it's like really emotional stuff. And I think it is potentially playing on that goodwill, isn't it? It's taking advantage of that goodwill, which can only go so far before it really starts to impact on your family. And yeah, it's serious.
Yeah, I don't think anybody that's not in the profession, but it's the same as the police, it's the same as the fire. If the police are out on a call, they can't automatically leave for a new shift to take over. They have to finish that call, so that runs them over into their overtime too. These professions, we just can't walk away. We are here to help, and we're here to give people what they need, but it's where does that stop? And it's not, yes, we have time owed in lieu and things like that, but even at that, you'll find that still keeps accumulating, and you're like, where does this really stop for us? Is it by, even if we qualify and we bring more and more people in, will this ever change about unpaid overtime? I don't know, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
It's more and more, but we'll have more and more people leaving. It's mentorship and guidance, and I don't know whether you have seen the legacy mentors at the start of a career and also at the end of a career, whether we need to be more open to bringing those in for newly qualified nurses to encourage them, don't do what we do.
Yeah.
And prioritize things a bit more.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. So between us, I think we've really given a flavour from the nursing profession. Let's go over to Rory and get your perspective on it, Rory.
Thank you. And it was really tough listening to some of those conversations. I can hear the overwhelm. I can feel it. And my first question is, what's changed since or through and then since COVID? Because COVID was a crisis. Certainly here in South Africa, we weren't allowed to visit. So you dropped somebody at the hospital, they had to walk in by themselves. They were looked after by the nursing team. And then when they were discharged, that whole time frame, they were purely and simply in the care of the nursing team. Now, that was over and above and more than an extra on top of, in addition. And my question is, what have we learned and how are we applying that? Because in one sense, I hear we are asking the team just to be more gritty, to just keep on and to be more resilient. And my question always is, you've got to be asking me to draw from an energy reservoir, from a reserve. If I don't have that reserve, if that reserve is depleted, what is left for me to give? And I use the analogy of wineskins. If you look at the way our work is shaping out, we have so many new things that are happening. And in one sense, we are arriving with old wineskins. And when you put new wine into old wineskins, you lose both. You lose the wineskin and you lose the wine.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering if there isn't and what more it's going to take to initiate that conversation around something's not right.
Yeah.
And it's not just the people. We need to be, you mentioned the word, we need to be looking at a culture change. We need to be looking at those issues of meetings. It's the issue of the managers. It's the whole system that actually needs to pause and stop and reflect it is a noble and an extremely caring profession. I think too often we rely on people's sense of calling, that sense of dedication, that sense of wanting to. But those very people are the ones that are struggling with boundaries. They're the ones that are more concerned with the patient, but at what cost? And it's like we've been trained in our preparation to run a sprint. But you get out there and nobody tells you the rules have changed. You with the training that you've got, you're running a marathon, but your shoes aren't right. Your hydration isn't correct. You haven't had the adequate coaching. You haven't had the muscle memory kind of being worked. You get thrown into the deep end, and the system keeps working. And in one sense, you go to slipstream into the system, and oftentimes you wear that badge of, well, I see my colleagues are doing it, therefore I have to. And you know, I remember in lockdown, we called them out as helpers, healers, and heroes. Yeah. And I remember there was a challenge. Actually, guys, we are not heroes. We are even more vulnerable. We're even more hurt. We're even more run down and overwhelmed than you are. So can we drop the hero? We're not the superhero that's wearing the cape. Actually, we are probably more vulnerable and more human. And I think that we skewed a bit of that conversation during COVID with this idea that we have heroes. And I'm not saying that the hospital working environment is not heroic. I think it's fundamentally heroic. But when we brand it as a hero, we actually raise the bar in terms of, therefore I can't speak, therefore I can't challenge, therefore
I expect them to be able to just be in superheroes. Yeah. Yeah, they're fine because they're superheroes. We don't need to help them out.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
We need to put us more as human rather than heroes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because we see what Wonder Woman does, we see what Superman, and we see what Batman. Can I tell you, nobody in the hospital is any of those. Yeah. Human, we have skin, we have organs. We are completely normal human people.
Yeah.
There was one thing that I remember reading years ago in my early career, and it was wounded healers. And it was the concept that we are no different to the people that are coming in for treatment. We just don't have that specific diagnosis. So yes, we ourselves are wounded, but we are here in a particular capacity. But actually we all are, Gabo Mate talks around, he says we are all traumatized.
Yeah.
And it is becoming more pervasive. The speed and the pace and the acceleration and the relentlessness of just ongoing, consistent change is just making us more and more traumatized. And the issue is we need to that stop, pause, reflect, and review. Because I don't think we can just keep on keeping on.
Yeah. No,
without a sense of cost and consequence.
Yeah. You mentioned it earlier, and again there, it's false economy. The women the nurses, largely women that I interviewed in the book, you can feel, and they've experienced really senior, amazing people leaving before retirement age. They just, can't take it, or retiring early, when they can carry on. Lots of background to that and lots of reasons for that, but it's false economy because these are the foundation of the NHS, in my mind. We can't afford for them to leave early. They need to be there to support the new nurses coming through, but the recruitment and retention are both really, really dire, and it's because we're not taking it seriously. That's the culture change, isn't it? And the other thing I was just going to add was a few posts ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, I did some research into the number of staff coming in, and the number of midwives and nurses and midwives coming in is increased quite considerably the last couple of years, to the point where you'd think, I think it's 68,000 from the top of my head. It's visit my post if you want the exact numbers, but I think it was something like 68,000 over the last 2 years, an increase in FTE in nurses and midwives, which you would think, well, that's got to that's got to be helping. But actually, I think there's too many other dysfunctional things going on in the system, like the meetings, like a lot of things, which mean that's a bit of a drop in the ocean, actually, because the amount of waste in the system through rework and not getting things right first time, which is my big drive, it means that extra resource just gets swallowed up like that. So I think we will all end up coming back to it's a reform and a culture change, and becoming much more proactive in changing pathways, making things more efficient and effective, getting things right first time is the direction of travel that I'm sort of trying to work towards. It'd be interesting just to see if you feel the same, you two feel the same.
Yes, if it is 68,000 coming in, but we have people retiring, we have people leaving because they can't handle the pressures anymore, or you have people on long-term sick. So those figures, yeah, it's great that all those people are coming, amazing career, but are we balancing it out with the rest of the figures that are coming through? Plus, if you have your senior nurses that are on long-term sick, who is actually educating and training these new midwives and new nurses coming in? So we have to look at that. What are we doing? And I know some of the nurses and midwives that I even speak to, they're like, they've just came to the range of the career, like, and they've had 50, 40, 30 years experience, and they're just like, what's the point anymore? And it's sad that we're actually at this position, but they're like, they can't keep up.
Yeah.
And but is this to do we need to now start looking at more advancement, like advanced nurse practitioners, the career developing, and nurses being at the forefront, and then doctors being more the complex cases and they see those? Well, is it about where you can go in your career and things like that? Who knows? But there's a lot of things that we still need to work out in the systems.
Yeah, absolutely, which is a good segue for me just to leave you two to it for a couple of minutes, because I'll go and check the reports run. This is all live, so if something goes wrong, which is highly possible in a live environment, then we'll see. But yeah, if you guys carry on, but then hopefully we'll bring the report up and we'll start going through that, and that can be the foundation for the next steps. Okay, given that these feel to be the problems, what do we do about it? Okay.
So Nicola, I'm curious, the training protocol,
yes,
the way we actually onboard our new hires, when was that last reviewed?
I'm not going to lie, I don't know, actually. I do not know. The things are changing and people are starting to look at things, but I don't know whether we're actually capturing the full in-depth of it, but I couldn't tell you when the last report was done.
Just again, my curiosity, when I did my psychology training, one of the things that really I was incredibly impressed was when the team went to a patient around the bed. You had this multiplicity of voices. You had the dietitian, you had the physio, you had the specialist surgeon, you had the GP, you had the nurse, you had the psychologist, you had whoever needed to be there. And the mandate that we had, and this is my training, the mandate that we had was, let's make sure we got the right diagnosis in the team, which then leads to the right prognosis in terms of the best treatment. And the principle was, let's get this person out of here as quickly as possible with the least amount of friction and frustration at the lowest possible cost with the highest quality, and that they don't come back with the same issue again. And I found that sort of collaborative voice in that initial diagnostic was supremely beneficial. And again, my sense at the moment, I look at colleagues who are in the medical space, and it's the brag of, we just done a 72-hour shift. Can you make a decision when you haven't slept for 72 hours? What sort of decision are you making?
Yeah. It's long hours are not ideal. There was a bit of research published where it was looking at, is a 4-day week better than those 3 long days? We know those 3 long back-to-back 12-hour shifts are not good for anybody. So do we need to look at more friendlier hours? The problem is with that, then you have the work-life balance policy. So you get to dictate what way your shifts work. Firstly, the 8-hour shifts probably are better because you can clock off and then go. But then people like doing the 12 hours to get an extra day off a week. But then at what compromise are you doing that?
Yeah.
We do know that they're not good. Normally, after my 3rd long day, I can't even get words out of my head. I can't even get words. My family sometimes look at me and I go, just don't speak to me for a couple of hours. Just let me get
Wind
okay.
down.
Yeah, or don't phone me because I will not be answering. And I spoke to one of my friends who got home the other week and she was like, do you know when it was just a really busy, long shift? And she said to me, Nicola, my partner wanted to talk. And I was like, did you talk to him? Here she was, just don't even speak to me for about an hour. And then he's gone, and then she was just grunting answers back. And I was like, good chat. And it's those type of things where how can you decompress after those shifts? How can you be the best? You're being pulled in so many directions. How do we get the best out of people, the best care, and the best working environments with the optimal? We know getting a 15-minute break, tea break in the morning, having your lunch break, and then going home is probably optimal. But if you're on a 12-hour shift that is constant, there's no break in the acuity of the patients, or if you're being called or your lunch break's called short, how is that impacting on the staff member there and the care that's actually being delivered?
Yeah, it's tough. I'm pleased to report that it has worked. It's all run nicely, so I can share screen. Are you guys ready to have a look at it?
Yep.
Sure.
Okay. So I'll share screen. So I'll just bring this up. I'm guessing that's quite small, is it?
Slightly.
Can you see it moving? Is that, have I got it set up right? Okay, great. Okay then, so this was the context that we set up for everybody just to get their heads in the zone. And then what we've got with this particular type of report is we've got the exec summary at the top and we've got the sentiment of it. So the duality of dedication and circumstantial strain is creating a 70 out of 100. So I suspect that would be a higher score if we weren't all really committed to trying to carry on doing, and to carrying on to serve. If we'd all said, well, that's it, I've had enough, that score would be closer to 100. So that's what that's telling us. And again, just to reiterate with this system, if you like, it's meant to create insights for us and to get us to look into things that we hadn't previously considered. That's really the raison d'etre for this. It's not a done deal, this is perfect. It's just to get us thinking. That's really what it's about, and to start pointing us into where do we need to research and what do we need to look into next. So the top 5 insights from the people that have contributed are the prevalence. So it's significant. And actually, if we look down here, we can see that from the contributors into this report, and we'll see how many there are in a minute when we scroll down, there's an average of 7.9 hours per week that people are doing overtime that they're not getting paid for. Now, that is not a million miles away from the RCN survey that I posted about earlier on in the week, where 47% of nurses are working in excess of 5 hours unpaid overtime. This is slightly higher, but we don't know in this environment, because it's completely open to everybody on LinkedIn, who's actually been contributing. So we need to just take that into account. But again, it's about being directionally correct. Is this suggesting to us that we've got a problem? And I would argue that it is. I wouldn't take this number as absolutely the number to hang our hats on and to quote all over the place, because the sample size is low and we don't know exactly in this scenario who's contributed. But it's given us a direction of the stuff we need to think about here. This is important. We can't just keep ignoring it. We've got to look at the culture change. We've got to look at system change. So the top 5 insights then, we've got that prevalence of unpaid overtime, which I think feels visceral, as Rory was saying earlier. We've got systemic inefficiencies, bureaucratic hurdles, cultural norms, again, coming through from the people that have fed into this. recruitment and retention impact, that's making things worse, and mental health considerations. So that actually feels like quite a good representation of that discussion that we've just had. Guys, I don't know if you want to add anything else to this before I scroll down.
Just while you stepped out on the report, Anthony, we were chatting around the training protocol. Remember, I mentioned that my sense is that we are training people to almost run a sprint, and actually the reality is that they're running a marathon. And maybe that's part of, in between that recruitment and retention, is the issue of onboarding and training.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And actually, if I just reflect back on the research from the book, what I picked up was a sense of the training and the devotion and the training sets you up to come in as this super nurse. But actually, when you hit the ground and you see the reality, it's quite soul destroying because you're not delivering the quality of care that you've been trained to deliver, and it can be quite soul destroying. So no doubt that there are training issues.
I think when I used to, and this is probably dating my year, the recruitment and the training, how it was years ago, before you could take on a band 6 post or a band 7, you had to have so many years qualified to have that experience. We're now bringing nurses out, and I'm all about nursing advancement, and I'm very much about that. But I think we're not giving them enough of the basics, getting them in, getting them learning the basic line first, and then going, right, okay, what career pathway do you want to choose? Here's your flow into that area, and work your way up. Nowadays, there's no sort of real criteria for, it's now taken off about how many years experience you need before you apply for a band 6 or band 7 post.
Yeah, no, I think all that can come into the discussion for sure in terms of what do we change and how do we do it. The next section of the report is basically just drilling into more detail behind these top high level factors. So there's more of them down here. I'm just getting a little bit more detail as well. Just shout out if there's anything that you want to particularly talk about. This is all.
I think we kind of, that number 2, that sort of that whole cultural norm and system is I think it's becoming a more entrenched sort of mindset. And one of the things that I'm proposing that we would have to investigate and explore is be curious with what can be, what might be, what would be that better work environment, and how do we get from that desired new end state? What's that gap from where we are now? And get the voices of the people, because they've also probably got the solution at hand.
Yeah, no, absolutely. When we come down to the bottom of this report, there's a section about, okay, what are we, given these things, what are we going to actually do, and what we're going to focus on going forwards to make these changes happen? A bit, just picking up on Nicola's point earlier around, you go in meetings, but nothing seems to happen. So one of the things that I would pull out, and we'll pull out a bit later, is this one around systems and linking that into how do we make sure that you do get the breaks? How do we make sure that you do get to go to the toilet, etc.? So I'll pull that out a bit later. But these all feel a bit more detailed to them, but they all feel really consistent with what we were talking about. I also just want to make the point that the whole purpose for this process is you get this Gestalt view, and some of these things will be new that you've not thought about because new people are making contributions and you're seeing things from different perspectives. But then it's, okay, now we've got this. Which ones do we think for our team are the most critical and the ones we should start to make an impact on straight away? And then you can go in and drill down on that particular thing. And you could run one of these again, specifically on a particular element to get new insights, new ideas on that one particular thing. The summary here in terms of the impacts, pulling out what we were talking about, is there's only so much you can get out of a human being, and if we don't look after our key resources, it just leads to more catastrophic impact and more pressure and we become like a hamster on a wheel, don't we? Which is essentially a lot of the stories we've been telling have been like that. So these are the things that people are suggesting we look into to maybe improve things as well. We haven't got a massive amount of time, but let's just have a quick look at these and see which one you'd like to pull out.
Yeah, the staff wellbeing would probably be in the mental health. I'm all about that.
Yeah.
Anthony, if you check the private chat.
Yeah. We've also got in here suggestions from the system in terms of where we can go and research. Okay, so Bethany's not with us now. I don't think, is she? Bethany did join, I think. Oh, she's there. Here we go.
Yeah.
Sorry for the delay, Bethany. I was on that other screen and I didn't.
I thought you would be. I thought you would be, and I'm so sorry. I don't know what it is. Our Wi-Fi got wiped out, so I was delayed. I was sitting there waiting for. Oh, I just had the back screen going, and as soon as you started it, I don't know what happened to it, but. I've been able to listen to a lot of what Nicola and Rory have said, and I agree with an awful lot of it.
Brilliant.
I think there's a massive number of vacancies for clinical staff just in England alone, and those figures were from April. So I think we've talked about this issue for so many years, that it is a sticking plaster, and that we're not doing our staff, and Nicola has so eloquently articulated this, we're not doing our staff any good, we're not doing ourselves any good, and we don't provide good examples of good working behaviours in terms of the number of hours we work. Mm-hmm. And I think that's sad, and we've got to change. We can't keep sticking a plaster over the NHS and expecting it to work well and get the best out of our staff and get the best outcomes for patients. It just won't work. We've got to change.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. If I'm still sharing the screen, I'm just going to whiz down to this table here and put you on the spot, everyone, and say, given those things in the report and given those things we've discussed, which thankfully there's a lot of crossover and consistency, imagine that you're all powerful and you can go back to your team now and you can put some resource into this if need be. What would be the things that you would say, right, team, we're going to focus on this one thing? There's lots of things there, but we're going to focus on this one thing. We're going to do something about it. What would it be? Shall I start with you, Beth, so you've got a bit more airtime?
Yeah, I think it's really difficult to pick one out, Anthony. I think skill mix, and again, Nicola's alluded to this. It's about how long do we support, mentor, train a newly qualified staff nurse. So I would have to say skill mix, but I'm pulled because it's about well-being. If we don't do something very soon, but I would say staff well-being comes out.
Okay, brilliant. And then over to you, Nicola.
I'm going to have to back Bethany on that because I was thinking staff. We know the skill mix is a massive, massive thing, and mental health is. We need to join the two up. I don't know how we do it, but we need to look at it. But then, do we need to go back into the universities when we're training people? Yeah, that would be my thing. The skill mix and the mental health. How do we overcome all this?
Yeah.
And yeah.
Okay, brilliant. And then over to you, Rory.
So I'm going to put a slightly different spin. I absolutely agree with you, but the choice of where do you start? This is a complex systemic problem. So here's what we're looking at. We're going to talk to the people that are taking the most strain, which is the staff and their well-being. And I don't disagree with you, because unless and until you actually acknowledge that the people in the system are either going to be alive or dead, that doesn't really matter what the system is. So I get you on that. I would propose that we would stretch ourselves to say, what else? And let's be curious in terms of how can we look at the system and the people perhaps at the same time? And maybe we have to start flexing between the two. And it's not to say that this is stacking up a whole lot of dominoes and that you have to do this one and then the next one. I think the world of linearity is long gone. I think we are in a world now of complexity, literally, and chaos. And we need to be looking at it from a point of the system and the component pieces, but we need to be flexing and dynamically moving between them.
Yeah, I get you. It is really complicated. I hadn't thought about this before this session, but just us talking it through has made me believe that what I would do with this in terms of my number one thing would be, I've chapter 10 of the book is self-fit, and I would get the team to go through that first, because that is about that well-being, but it's also about learning the skills and the techniques and the language around behavior change. And then once we've got that in place on something personal to us, then we can bring that into the team, because we've got a bit of a shared understanding, shared language, and then we can definitely make sure that we get our breaks. We can definitely make sure that we get our drinks done, delivered and maintained. We can definitely make sure we've got toilet breaks, all those just basics that we've got to get right first before we can do anything else. That would be my starting point. I was just thinking, Nicola, I don't know where you are, Beth, at the moment, but Nicola, you're definitely in a team. If you want to do that, I can let you have that chapter 10 and be really happy. No cost. We'll just go through it and let's do a test.
Absolutely, because my team potentially will be expanding, so it'll be good to actually start on a pilot and see how we actually we can achieve what we need to achieve. But I would be absolutely more than welcome. Brilliant. And take that on. Yeah,
let's create that use case, and then we can share the results with everybody. That'd be fab. Sorry, I think I might have just started to interrupt somebody earlier as well.
I was going to say, Anthony, that I do agree with what Rory said about the complexity of the system of healthcare that we have in this country. It's grown and it's changed, and we've just expected clinical people, nurses, AHPs, everybody actually, to keep pace with that change.
Yeah.
And we haven't supported them to do that. And when you think that something like there is 35 million pounds worth, and I think it might be more than that actually. I can't remember whether it was a million or a billion, but that is a massive number of pounds that are worked unpaid every year by clinical staff.
Yeah.
And I think whilst, nurses like us, Nicola, and people like you, Anthony and Rory, we have got solutions. We don't actually have time to implement them. And part of that, I believe, is because the people who should be listening don't and won't. There's a difference. And that has got to come from government. It has to come from government, because with the amount of vacancies we've got, with the amount of overtime being worked, and sorry, I just leaned over to pick up my notes because I daren't move my laptop anymore. But on average, and this is just on average, nurses, this is not AHPs or anybody else in the health service, nurses are working on average 7.6 hours of unpaid overtime every week. That's a shift a week that the government, the NHS, are taking from our nurses, and they're not accepting the consequence of it. Yeah. So I think it has to come from the change has to be ignited and the flames fanned from government but the fire has to be sustained by the nursing staff and the AHPs in our organisations. If we don't do it, this system, I think, is in danger of collapse.
Yep.
Because it cannot. It just the attrition rate for nurses coming into our system is massive. Yeah. And again, I had some figures about that. And just very quickly, it was that staff, the attrition rate for qualified nurses and midwives in England alone in April was 11.5%. That was up 2.5% on the previous year. That's worrying. That is really worrying. That should tell any politician, any NHS leader, that we are not doing what we need to do for our staff to keep them.
Yeah, I know Rory's got a quick comment, but I'd just jump in and say, I'm with you. This is the reason I'm trying to do these things, is to get people to go, we can't just carry on. The status quo might have been okay 20 years ago, but the reform or die message from Starmer is spot on, I think. And I'm surprised more people aren't quoting it. I quote it every day. I think we're in such dire straits that we have to reform or die. We can't keep doing the same old. But
I think, Anthony, who's going to start that? I know you're doing, and your book is just amazing, and I love it. And I quote from it quite often when I'm talking to people. But what is it? I mean, is it going to take somebody like me to go out on my own and group with a number of other people? Because I think that's what it's going to take. I think we need a bandwagon here, but not a supercilious bandwagon, but one that really does drive change.
It's sad.
Frightening.
We can probably get more. If I was to walk away from the NHS and come back as an independent person, I can probably achieve more of a change than somebody actually sitting within the NHS that can go, these systems have to change. But what I also find too is the nursing profession, we're not in those big exec boards. No. We're not sitting there, yet we're the ones with the innovation change. I did a panel yesterday about innovations and entrepreneurship, and it was just like, we're here, we see it, we're trained holistically to look at a patient, we can forward think, we can see what's coming. Allow us to be in those positions to turn around and go, look, this is what's happening. And I don't mean this to be rude or anything like that, but people moving into the NHS from high up jobs that have did farming or something like that, unless you've worked within the NHS on the ground, seeing what's happened and worked your way up through the NHS, I don't think it's possible to lead that change, because you have no clue what happens on the floor.
I'd agree with you.
It's okay walking around and seeing people and going, yep, but you're only getting a snippet of a half an hour walk around, 5 minutes. You're only meeting and greeting and walking away. But it's actually coming up through the trenches, believe it or not, where you get to see, okay, these changes can occur, but we need to be listened to, and we need to be in those exec boardrooms and the government rooms going.
You've just made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up, because that's why I'm trying to do the genie work, is to bridge that gap between the people at the top and the people like us that are seeing the pain. I say like us, I can't really.
I think there's a lot of us out there, Anthony, like-minded people. You and I both, we link with them on LinkedIn. I think there's a lot of very good senior people out there who, when I say senior people, I mean people that have got experience, well, senior as in age with me, but people who've got an awful lot of experience, who have come up through the ranks in the health service, and really understand. I can remember, just to give you a little snippet of how this affected me, and the day that I learned to, even though I still do work long hours, but I can take them back. I was a band 7 running a big department I'm going back 20 odd years ago. And I was working ridiculous hours, never took my annual leave. And I can remember my boss at the time, who was one of the kindest nurses I'd worked with. And she said, "You're not carrying your leave over to next year, because this is now the second year you've done it. And you cannot keep putting a sticking plaster over what you're doing. The more you do it, the less we can see the cracks."
Yeah.
And that was the point at which I made sure that my nurses in my team were well looked after, because I couldn't keep running without them, and I couldn't keep the department running without them. I think there's so much that we have to do, but first of all, I think we've got to galvanise ourselves into a body of well experienced, well qualified nurses, whatever you want, clinicians, or Anthony, you've so well illustrated what it's like to work in the health service. I think we've just got to galvanise ourselves into some sort of action, not to be uber political, but to get that voice out. Do you know what it's like? It's like being on a meeting like this and somebody has control of your mic. As a nurse, as a physio, as an OT, as a psychotherapist, a dietitian, whatever you might be, you're in a meeting and somebody's got control of that mic. You're not heard. You're just not heard. And it's now time, before we move into the next quarter of the century, that we have to do this. Otherwise, there won't be an NHS. There just won't be.
No, I agree. And I think you've raised a massive point there, Beth, we're hiding the failures, aren't we? By doing all the reworks and the workarounds, and doing the extra hours and the extra days, we're papering over all those failure points. They need to be resolved in the first place.
I mean, can you imagine, Anthony, what would happen if all of those nurses who work that 7.5 hours, 7.6 hours actually, overtime without pay every week. So we know that 50% of them might only be doing an hour, but 50% of them are doing a hell of a lot more than 7.5 hours overtime unpaid. So if that's the case, what would happen if every single one of those nurses said no? The government and our own, or a lot of our leadership within the NHS, know that nurses are never going to do that. They can't do it, because there's a patient at the end of it, a patient that could be their mum, their dad, their husband, their wife. So they're not going to do it. We cannot run the health service like that anymore. It has to change.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And I think you might pick up how strongly I feel about unpaid overtime. Not because nurses are doing it, or any other people who work in the health service are doing it for the love of it, because it's a vocation. It's because it hides what's going on behind the scenes.
It does hide. And we haven't picked up today, there's a sense of unfairness about it as well, isn't there? If we're all in it together and we've got the purpose to absolutely redesign and have that second healthcare revolution that I talk about in the book, we'd be happy as Larry doing a day's extra overtime, a week overtime. We'd love it. But it's the fact that it's taken for granted. It's not appreciated. You're not even, a lot of the time, nobody even says thank you.
These nurses, in my view, have become, and since one of the best places, I have to say, that I've done interim work, consultancy work over the last 4 years, was North Bristol. I would quite happily go back any time and work with that group of people. But there were nurses there who were tired. I think the difference was, to a degree, it was recognised, certainly by some of the senior leadership, the executive leadership in that trust. It was recognised. If only
my
every single trust.
as well.
Pardon?
My experience there is great as well. There's some great leaders.
Maybe that should be our launch pad. North Bristol.
I work in North Bristol. It's one of my trusts that I work in, and it's one of the best trusts that I've worked in for their staff, I have to say. And I really commend it. And even the Chief Nursing Officer, Steve Hams, He is, I have a lot of time on, he is just...
He's one of the most sensitive to what is going on around him that senior nurses that I've come across, and having worked as a director of nursing myself, and I was very, very proud of the fact that I went back to the floor every week. I saw what some of these nurses were doing, but actually when I say nurses, Anthony, I mean unregistered nurses as well, because I think we are doing them a huge disservice.
Yeah. The other, I think we could talk for hours, but the other point on that was the big trigger for me to design Genie and build it was engaging on a different project completely. This is 18 months ago. Really junior nurses on a big project hadn't been heard. No. And they were really junior, and I was literally blown away by how smart they were. They knew the problem, but they also had the answers as well. And I was like, oh my God, it's unreal. It's like every human being that we can really engage with properly has got a massive amount to give. That's my drive. Yeah, brilliant. We have run over, but I'm guessing if people have had meetings at 1 o'clock, they've just left us anyway. But if there's anybody left on LinkedIn that wants to put a comment into the chat, and if you've got any questions or want to challenge us saying we're talking a lot of rubbish, then please do so. We're completely open to those challenges. But I've really enjoyed that discussion. I thought it was really useful.
I'm so sorry I was delayed getting on.
No problem. It
was nice to listen. Gave me an opportunity to listen rather than talk.
Excellent. As long as there's somebody with me, I don't feel like I'm completely on my own. That's all that matters.
Yeah.
So good. Excellent. And if you guys have topics that you want to develop and come on and say, Anthony, can we do one of these sessions on a specific topic? I've been quite broad. Last week was meetings, which quite similarly, the wasted time in meetings seems to correlate really closely to the overtime, which is interesting, isn't it? Yeah. But these are quite broad topics. So if there's anything in particular that you think, actually, as a head of nursing, this is a big topic for me, and then we could focus, try and bring in other heads of nursing so we get a peer debate and we can thrash out what we think the solutions might be and that sort of thing, then just let me know and we can set new ones of these up.
Anthony, can you and I have a chat on, we can do it either on phone or on LinkedIn or on here or whatever after this, because I think there is one burning topic that
definitely
I'd like to propose.
Brilliant.
I'd like to talk to you about it first.
Yeah, fab. I'm sort of like you, Beth. I want to try and start a momentum going where we've got people with us and we're all banging the same drum to get this change to happen. And the bigger we get, the more influence we can have.
I think we've got a real opportunity to, as a body of experienced NHS people, to do that. Wes Streeting has he got a clue? No. He's been in opposition for 14 years. He should know what needs to be fixed.
Yeah.
Unpaid overtime being one of them.
Yeah.
So now he's asking the public. It's just, in my view, it is just a gimmick. Oh, well, because if it goes wrong, well, it wasn't my fault. This is what you wanted, Joe Public.
I don't know whether you have seen some of the comments that have been made document to turn around and say some of them that have been put forward by the public. It's just
sorry, that was my dog barking.
You're okay. That's not going to work. But a topic that I want to talk about.
Yeah, brilliant.
We'll catch up.
Yes.
Yeah, fantastic. And again, that goes to people, if there's anybody left on LinkedIn, if any of you got any burning topics that you'd love to do this sort of thing with, then reach out on LinkedIn. That's my main place of contact. Thanks ever so much, everyone. Rory, have you got any final comments to make for us?
Just the way you talked around centers of excellence. I really believe those are beacons of hope. And if we listen to Napoleon Bonaparte, he said, leaders are dealers in hope. If we can find those, and we can actually, instead of sitting and it's been a fantastic conversation, but instead of bemoaning the darkness, what if we reversed it in terms of let's highlight those beacons of hope, those beacons of what's working and working well. Let's identify those. Let's exaggerate them. Let's shout them out and let's amplify them. I think we can do both.
Right.
I think we must look at what you're raising, because it's mission critical. It's adapt or die. At the same time, one of the ways of adapting is where are those centers of excellence, those amazing people, and let's exaggerate and amplify that hope.
And let's get these do this stuff, start sharing the use cases, and build from there. 100%.
Yeah, Nicola, I'll link with you on LinkedIn.
I think there's a lot we can do.
Yeah,
there is.
Brilliant. Thanks, everyone. Really enjoyed that.
Really lovely to meet you, Rory, as well.
Yeah, thanks, everyone.
Thank you.